One, your life.
Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Teisha Johnson. I am the Senior Director of Admissions for the Illinois College of Optometry located here in Chicago. And I have with me two of our current students who are going to join me in this webinar discussing how to apply to ICO, and they will offer some advice and recommendations and share their experience in the application process. So I have Carly and Sydney, who will be chiming in a little bit later during our presentation. We will have time for questions and answers. So if you want to type in your questions into the chat, whether it's via YouTube or Facebook, please feel free. And we'll make sure that we will get through all of those during our time this afternoon together. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We will, like I said, have a presentation that we're going to go through, discussing the application process and sharing information with you on sort of the best advice recommendations that I give to applicants in terms of how to navigate the process, because at times it can seem overwhelming and it can seem confusing, but the admissions team is here to direct you. In my role at ICO, I serve on the admissions committee, and I also do interviews for the college. So I've been here, next month actually will be 16 years, so a lot of experience in working with undergraduate students, even high school students or career changers looking to gain entry into ICO. So some of the things that we are going to talk about include the requirements, looking at some of the numbers, so that's going to be GPAs and test scores. We'll talk a little bit about the self-assessment that I recommend applicants do prior to applying. So whether you, again, are a freshman in college or career changer or the high school student, some of the self-assessment can help you prior to applying. And then we'll talk about the application process as well. What does that look like? Things that you should keep in mind as you're going through the process. So first, let's talk about requirements. We don't have a requirement in terms of major. You'll see from our data here from our entering class of 2021, most students are going to come in with a biology degree. It's up to you to choose, the major that's going to be suitable for you. I do recommend in that process, if you become a non-science major, you want to consider how you're going to get your additional science coursework taken. A little bit later, we'll talk about the requirements in terms of prerequisites. So let's say if you're an English major, you have your English curriculum, you'll want to make sure that you're going to get your science classes added to your curriculum. And if you can take at least 3 classes, science classes at a time, that would be helpful in that it gives you a little bit of a feel for what you can expect in optometry school. There's nothing like the real thing, of course, but being able to take some of those classes would be together will be helpful to you. So let's talk a little bit about degree. We're one of a few schools that do not require students to have a bachelor's degree for entry into the program. You can enter it having a minimum of 90 semester hours, but do note the admissions committee will look more closely at your application. Typically, students are applying during their senior year, so they would have at least 3 years of coursework under their belt. Someone coming in as a non-degree and they're coming in with, let's say, toward the minimum end of the 90 hours, you're only typically going to have about 2 years of coursework under your belt. So it's going to be very important for you to make sure that you're on track academically in undergrad and on track to complete the prerequisites in the time that you would join us. So earning your degree can make you more competitive in the process, and you'll see that the majority of applicants who do come into the program will have their degree earned. But if it's something that you're interested in, definitely reach out to the admissions team. We're here to help you navigate the process and can work with you and give you some advice on looking at your transcripts and where you are and anything you may need to do to improve your chances of gaining entry as a non-degree student, or even if you're getting your degree, you definitely can reach out to us for counseling as well. So a little bit about the course requirements. So these are the prerequisite courses that I referenced a little bit earlier. You'll see that you have science requirements and your general requirements, more your gen eds. Some things to note about the requirements. We do accept coursework taken at a community college. Sometimes we have applicants who maybe were dual enrolled and took classes at a community college while they were finishing up high school. Sometimes students will start at a community college and then go on to a four-year institution. In either case, as long as you have earned the minimum grade, and for our program is C's or better in your prerequisite courses, and you have the number of semester hours, we will accept that as your prerequisite fulfillment. We also do accept AP credit. Some applicants will have earned AP credits and their undergraduate institution, let's say, gave them credit for calculus and general biology with lab. If that is the case, we will accept AP credits as long as that we can see that on your transcript from your undergraduate institution. We will accept it for our program. Sometimes they'll do it in a block and say AP 15 hours, or they will list out the coursework. As long as we can find out what that coursework is, that can be used for your prerequisite courses. So as I mentioned, we require grades of C or better. If you, let's say you took stats and earned a C minus, you're going to be required to repeat that course. So it's important as you are starting your application process, whether you're, again, somebody who's going to be applying this upcoming application cycle or this current cycle, look at your prerequisites, see where you stand. And if you need to still take courses, you can still do that when you're in the application cycle. As long as your prerequisites are completed by August 1st of the year that you're going to enter optometry school, that's not a problem. Prerequisites shouldn't hold you up from applying. So this information is also on our website, so you can, print out or bookmark it and have a nice reference in terms of what ICO is looking for in terms of prerequisite coursework. So some recommended courses. So a lot of the applicants who are biology majors, you will look at these, 4 courses here under the human-based biological sciences and say, you know what, these are already built into my program. And if that's the case, that is great. My non-science majors, I always encourage you, in addition to what you saw on the prerequisite chart, add more sciences to your schedule. It's going to be important that you can expose yourself to as much sciences as possible. So some good courses to take are anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, cellular biology, genetics, molecular biology, really any courses that are in the biology department tend to be helpful in getting you more exposure to the human-based sciences. I do encourage, and I'll ask my students in a minute to chime in on this, I typically recommend, if you only could do a few of the additional courses, anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry I find are very helpful, given that you're going to have those classes in our program. So I'm going to start with you, Carly. By any chance, did you take anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry? And if you didn't, do you wish you would have?
So I did not take like a general anatomy class, but I did take a pretty, I would say, in-depth physiology course, as well as I did take 1 semester of biochemistry. Physiology for sure was hands down one of the most helpful classes that I took in undergrad by far. I've talked to some prospective students the past few months, and I mean, one of my biggest pieces of advice is, like you said, take as many science classes as you can. But physiology, like if I had to take one extra one other than the prereqs, it would be physiology for sure.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Sydney, your thoughts on anatomy, physiology, and biochem?
So I took an anatomy physiology course in undergrad, which I really enjoyed. It had a lot of dissection and things, and I feel like that was very helpful. I did not take a biochemistry course, and though I wish I did, one thing that I really appreciate about ICO is that she started from the beginning. The professor started from the beginning and was able to like work through some of the things that I was never exposed to. But going back, I wish I would have taken it. I'm sure it would have helped.
All right, thank you, thank you. And I do want applicants to know, if you do not take anatomy, physiology, or biochemistry, that is not, looked down upon, because that is not one of the required courses. These are just recommended courses that we feel are helpful to you, given that you're going to have them in your first year program. And some of the additional courses that we have listed, additional psychology courses, public speaking, business management, those are always nice to have, but again, are not required courses for students. So I don't want anybody to feel as though, all right, I need to take these classes here as well. No, a lot of the latter courses are more for, your personal knowledge, and the science courses are more to prep you for the loads you're going to receive and some of the coursework you're going to receive during your time here at ICO. All right. So next, let's talk just a little bit about the numbers and giving you guys some perspective. So for our last cycle, we had over 1,000 applicants applying to the program. And what I provided here is just some general data points in terms of the members of the first year entering class. So typically our GPA does range in that 3 to 3.5 to 3 to 4.2 GPA range. Total science, we report out now is a 309. You see our GRE overall percentile. And to note about the GRE, there are going to be 3 sections to the GRE, and what we're reporting here is information for the quantitative percentile added to the verbal percentile. So it's the combination of those 2 scores. So that's how we obtain this overall percentile. I typically, advise applicants, if you're in the 3s for GPA and OATs, you're in a good spot. It doesn't guarantee acceptance, but as you'll see with the GPA calculation, the majority of folks who are joining the program and tend to get accepted are at a 3.0 and higher. That does not mean, though, and you can see from the chart here, that students who are, say, at a 2.7, 2.8, 2.9 can't gain entry into the program. Typically, for those students who are on the lower end of the GPA scale, I do recommend counseling sessions, so reaching out to the admissions department to set something up so we can look at your academic history and offer you some advice, and hopefully work with you in terms of tailoring something where you can increase your GPA before applying to the program. But here's just some numbers just to give you an idea of the class, where the class is, and sort of what we have in terms of ranges. For the OAT, we've seen scores as low as 270 total science gain entry all the way to 400. So for there, you do have a range as well. So for the OAT, I do recommend that you study, prepare ahead of time, be strategic, and when you take the exam, as an applicant, if you have to retake, you have to wait 90 days. So our philosophy, what we encourage students to do is, let's say you're going to be applying for entry into fall of 2023. So ideally, you would be taking the OAT this summer. So hopefully you've had your biology, your chemistry, your physics under your belt, and you have started to look at, all right, how am I going to prepare? Am I going to take a course, or will I just use other materials that are out there? What type of practice exams will you use? Have you looked at the OAT user's guide to see what topics are covered in each of the sections? So doing that legwork now, and then preparing to take it in this summer. And on average, students tell us they take about 2 to 3 months to prepare for the OAT. Of course, that's going to vary person to person, but starting now to prepare for taking it in the summer is an ideal time. Typically in the summer, you're not going to be having as many courses under your belt. You may be working, but your schedule in most cases is a little bit freer versus doing a full load during your regular school year. I will ask Sydney. Sydney, do you have any advice for applicants who are getting ready to take the OAT?
So my biggest piece of advice would be, don't be scared to take it twice. I took it twice. The first time it was okay, but I just knew that I could do better, and I prepared in a different way and took it again. I got a much better score. So planning things out so you have enough time. So if that's an option you need to take, you have it there for you.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. And what did you change in your study habits, Sydney? You said that, you having taken it again, and I encourage students, you have to revisit your study habits and see what worked and what didn't work, and then tweak your plan. So how did you tweak your plan?
So originally, when I studied for it the first time, I was on my own. I had a preparation book, old notes from classes, and things like that. And both times that I studied for it, I actually was in like a current program for school, so it was a little bit more difficult. But the first time I did things on my own, and the second time I decided that I needed a little bit more structure, so I decided to take a Kaplan course, which turned out to be very helpful just because I needed the guidance on how best to study, and that actually worked a lot better for me.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. And Curly, what about you? How did you prepare for the OAT?
Yeah, so I'm a big planner person. So I actually started studying, I think probably in June, and then took the OAT that following January. So I gave myself a whole summer and a semester of school to study. That personally worked really well for me because once school started back in the fall, I was devoting way more time to school studying than OAT studying. But luckily, I had done a lot of stuff over the summer to where I could take it a bit easier. I ultimately just wanted to be as prepared as possible. I did not do a structured course. I kind of did everything on my own. I used a bunch of different resources. I used Chad's videos. I used a Kaplan book. That was a big one. A Princeton book. Even just notes from my classes that I took. So hopefully you didn't throw out your biology and chemistry notes because they will come back. They're very helpful in studying for the OAT. But yeah, I probably gave myself a whole like 6 or 7 months to study because I knew that that's what I needed to feel comfortable. And the biggest thing that I tell everybody is study for a way harder test than you're going to get, which makes sense. You want to be as prepared as possible. But if you are, you stick to a schedule, you are doing practice questions that, they might be a little harder than what you'll actually see on the OAT. But if you prepare yourself with that kind of material, knowing that, it's a little bit more difficult than what you're going to see, then once you are actually in there on test day, you're going to feel comfortable. You're not going to freak out. You're going to have seen all of that stuff before. So definitely prepare for a harder test than you're going to get. That's the biggest thing I tell everybody.
All right, great. And thank you both for that advice. And like I said, I would encourage you to just, plan ahead. If you can take it over the summer, that's great. If you do take it during the course of maybe the fall term or spring term, like Curly said, sort of be prepared that you're going to, of course, be focusing on school and the OAT. So you may want to allow yourself more time to prepare for it versus if you would have taken it in the summer. When we look at OATs, we're going to look at the most recent sets. Some applicants will take it maybe twice or even 3 times. So when we're looking at each set of scores, let's say an applicant has taken it 3 times, we're going to look at the third score, but we're also going to compare it to the first and second set of results. We're going to look to see, all right, what is the trend? Did scores go up? Did they go down? Did they maybe have sort of a wave pattern? I know sometimes they see the first set of scores, and let's say in physics and orgo, they don't do as well as they would have liked. So they end up focusing heavy on those and going light on the other sections. And sometimes I see in a retake that those 2 sections go up and then the others go down. When you are retaking the exam, you do want to study for the whole exam. You really need to give each section enough time to do reviews, to prep, and to make any modifications. So I would encourage anybody who finds themselves having to repeat the exam, do prepare and study for the whole exam. But in terms of what ICO will do, we will look at all results, focusing on the most recent sets in the instance where an applicant has retaken the exam. We do take the GRE. We started taking the GRE a few application cycles ago. So same thing really for the GRE. You do want to make sure that you study. While it does not have the science sections like the OET does, you still just not want to go into the exam blind. I encourage students to look at the resources that are available out there, whether they're in-person or online prep courses, or using a GRE study guide. Find the material, because for that exam, you still want to do well, and you still want to make sure that you're going to get the most competitive scores that you can for that exam. So let's move on here. So let's talk about sort of, I think, more of the softer side. You know, we talked a lot about the numbers here, but some things that I want to go over with you in terms of other things that get looked at during the application process and things that you can be working on for your future application to ICO. So as you know, optometry is a very interactive profession, so communication skills are going to be very, very important. And during the admissions process, we look at those in a couple of ways. Of course, I think a lot of people will think of the interview and having the verbal skills, communication skills, but we also look at the nonverbal communication skills during your interview as well. There is the writing sample that's going to be a part of your application. We have 2 essay prompts, so we're going to review those very closely. In terms of your knowledge of the profession, we don't have a minimum number of shadowing hours. However, we want to make sure that as an applicant, you have done your due diligence and you know what the profession is about. You know the difference between optometry, ophthalmology, and opticianry. You know what to expect from the profession. You've done your research and hopefully had an opportunity to observe in different modalities and different specialties. We know that's a challenge, given that we are still in a pandemic and you may not be able to reach out to an OD and do some in-person observations, but I would encourage you during these times to see if you can reach out to an OD and do informational interviews. Over the past year, I've had applicants tell me they've been able to engage with ODs that way in terms of informational interviews. Some ODs have done sort of a virtual open house or a virtual tour of their practice. So see what you can do and learn as much as you can about the profession. There are national websites, so the American Optometric Association, the National Optometric Association, and each state has an optometric association. So going out to their websites to see what's happening in the profession as well can broaden your horizon and inform you of what's happening, particularly even in your home states, what may be coming down the pipeline in terms of practice requirements or limitations that or limitations that may be in the states that they're looking to have expanded. So just sort of, using those as resources for you as well. Letter of recommendation. This is probably, the part of the application that you will not be able to see. So you will definitely find people who can speak to you, not just, all right, applicant A has earned an AMI coursework and they were a great student, but really trying to find a recommender, a faculty member, preferably for us a science professor or a pre-health advisor who can write a strong letter of recommendation for you. We also do require an optometrist letter of recommendation. So it's going to be important there to find someone who can write you a strong letter of recommendation. And something that you can do, starting from today, and even before you apply, and I encourage people to sort of do this self-check-in, is really, look at your application and say, all right, what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? What do my grades look like? What does my trend in grades look like? Do I know enough about the profession? Have I worked with somebody well enough to give me a strong letter of recommendation? Start looking and asking yourself those questions, because if you're a couple of years out, you definitely have time to work on your application. If you're somebody applying this June 30th for the seat in next year's class. You still have time to work on your application as well, but I think it's important to address any weaknesses you have, come up with a plan to address those. In the instance of, let's say, academics, maybe somebody's GPA is at, say, a 2.75. How many more terms left do you have before you're graduating, and how can you work on and improve your study habits between now and then to become a better student? Maybe working with a professor, going to tutoring, or some examples. And it's one of those things where it's you definitely want to sit down and take the time to do that self-assessment and see where you are. That also can be done again with the admissions team. As I mentioned earlier, we are more than welcome to sit down with applicants, and we'll be happy to do it virtually or over the phone to go over your academic history and offer you some recommendations and advice and ways to strengthen your application. Or if your academics are on par, sort of work with you in other areas that you may have questions about and wonder if you need to do additional work. Just offer you some feedback on where you stand currently in the process. So we still are accepting applications for this cycle. The deadline is coming up pretty quick here. It's going to be May 1st. And as I mentioned earlier, the application deadline for the 2023 entering class is going to be May 1st of 2023, but I'm sorry, the cycle will start June 30th of 2022. So it's almost a year process, but I always encourage students, do not wait to apply. A couple of reasons why. One, if you are interested in scholarship dollars, I always encourage you to apply as early in the process. Two, applying early gives the admissions committee opportunities to work with you. So let's say you apply in August, and maybe we want an applicant to take some additional classes. So it's more time to allow you to do that. You could possibly still find classes to take for fall, or even if you're in a quarter system, maybe a winter term, versus waiting to, let's say, April or May when taking additional classes. You may not have that opportunity to do so, given that, we're going to be starting school in a few months. So applying earlier is great. Same thing for the OAT. The OAT deadline is May 1st. If you take it May 1st, you're pretty much putting all your eggs in that basket. Let's say you don't do as well as you would have liked, you have to wait that 90 days. So that's, pushing you up against when you're going to be starting school in our program in sort of like mid-August. So I would say, applying earlier is better. But if you apply at the deadline, we're going to work with you to get your application processed through the system. And should you be required to retake the OAT, we will work with you regarding that. But I always encourage students to apply a little bit sooner, because the last point would be being prepared then to start school in August. Some applicants may say, all right, May 1st, not a problem. I can get my materials in. But if you interview in June, are you ready to then in 2 months, if you get accepted, join the program? So it's just some things to think about during that process. But keep in mind sort of the deadline, when things are due, OAT deadlines, restrictions there as well would be pretty important. So I'll ask Carly, when you apply, not necessarily the date, but were you sort of like early in the cycle, mid-cycle, toward the end?
I was very early in the cycle,
Okay.
like almost as soon as it opened up. I was excited.
All right, and there's nothing wrong with that. And Sydney, what about you?
I was actually a little bit late in the cycle, not close to the deadline, but later than the average person. So, yeah.
All right, and there's nothing wrong with that either, right? And like I say, sometimes when I have students, and I usually sort of get that. I usually have one that's like very early in the process and one that's so it's a little bit later in the process. Again, it's one of those things where I encourage applicants, again, to apply early. But if you apply, mid-cycle or toward the end of the cycle, that's okay too. And I guess the other thing that just popped to mind about applying at the deadline, this has not happened in some time, but I always encourage students, do realize that, we have I would say a limited number of seats. So, you want to make sure that if you're applying early, you do have that opportunity to gain that seat in the program. But if you're applying May 1st, don't think of it as, all right, I'm not going to get in. If you're a qualified candidate, you're going to get accepted. But I always encourage students, don't wait to the end and feel like, all right, not a problem. It should be easy going. Definitely applying earlier is a little bit better in the process. And even I think for your peace of mind as an applicant, that if I get my decision in October, I know where I'm going, then I can spend the rest of my time finishing up my studies and then preparing to arrive in ICO in mid-August. So some food for thoughts on sort of the application deadline and applying a little bit early in the process. So the application process. Hopefully everyone has looked at Optomcast. That is a centralized application service that the schools and colleges of optometry utilize. Definitely take your time and read through it. It's a lot of information on the website, but I always recommend applicants just don't go and start the application without reading what's required from you. Our information is out there. It's also on our website in terms of what's required from applicants. But some things I do want to point out. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to be required to do 2 essays. And over the years, I have found that a lot of students get caught up on the one-page autobiographical statements. So I tell students, you want to make sure you go in, read the prompt, read the restrictions, because this is limited to 4,500 characters. So you can't, submit an essay that's, say, 5 pages long. So adhere to the prompt, the questions that we ask, and then also the number of characters that you have available to you to use. Your letters of recommendation, you can see them as they're flowing through the system. Sometimes applicants will wait to have both letters in before submitting your application. You don't have to. You do have your application go through a verification process, so it's not going to immediately be available for us to act on in Optomcast. So if you see that maybe one letter is missing, it's okay to go ahead and submit your application. Typically, by the time your application has been verified through the CAS, and it's for us to review, both letters have hit the system. And be mindful that an application fee is due. There's a set fee for applying to one school, and each additional school will charge an additional fee. So keep in mind those requirements. So once you officially submit your application to ICO, we take it under review, and then we will place it in one of 3 buckets. The first was that an applicant has been invited to interview. Next, an applicant's file could be placed on hold for more information. And third, an application could be denied up front. In the process, the majority of applicants actually do get invited to interview on campus or virtually with our program. If a file is placed on hold, the email, will give you information about what it is that we need from you for your application. So maybe we want to see fall grades. Maybe we want to see your OAT results before inviting a candidate to interview. Maybe, a letter is missing, or both letters could be missing, and we're needing those letters before we can move forward. So the email that a candidate will receive is very straightforward in terms of what information that we need for your application to go forward. And in the case of an application being denied up front, an applicant would receive from us some information on some general suggestions on ways to improve their application for the next cycle, should they be interested in doing so, as well as feeling free to reach out to our office to do what we call a re-applicant counseling session, so we can review your application and offer you some suggestions on ways to improve it for the next cycle. So in terms of the interview day, this cycle we are doing in-person and virtual interviews. The big difference between the two, of course, if you're coming on campus, you do have the opportunity to do a tour of the campus. You have the opportunity to stay in our residential complex the night before your interview at no cost to you. And you have more engagement points with students. On our virtual interview day, we do have time for our interviewees to engage with a couple of current students, but on your in-person interview day, we have students who are serving as your tour guides and students who are serving as your lunch hosts, as well as your ambassadors. So you have more touch points, but depending on what your preference is and how you want to interview at ICO, you do have those two options available to you. And I will ask Sydney, and I believe you both did virtual interviews. I think last year was virtual interviews, so you didn't have that opportunity to immediately come on campus. But any advice on doing a virtual interview? I feel like we've been doing this for a couple of years now, but and we see that a fair number of students are still doing virtual interviews. So any advice for people applying virtually or interviewing virtually?
I think it's sort of similar to interviewing in person, just about being yourself. You get to be comfortable. You're usually at home. You're only dressed from like the top up. So, you know, a different level of comfort might give you some confidence, but just be yourself and be authentic and don't really try to be what you think they expect from you, you know, because the interview process is really just about getting to know you as a person and learning a little bit more about you. So, just being transparent and authentic.
Okay. All right. Great advice. Carly, you have any advice for applicants interviewing?
Yeah, so I second a lot of what Sydney said. You know, it's different in that you don't get to see the campus in person, interviewing virtually, that is. But, you know, you still dress nice, have a nice looking background, you know, minimize any distractions because you still want it to be as professional as possible. But interviews are way less stressful than I thought they were going to be. I mean, most of them didn't really feel like an interview. Like, you don't feel like you're being interrogated. You just feel like you're having a conversation.
I think our website is great and it provides a lot of information, but sometimes there are those personal questions that you want to ask. And so be prepared to ask your interviewer those questions. Our interview format is one-on-one, so it's going to be open file. Your interviewer would have read through your Optomcast application to get a good idea of what I call the paper version of you. So everything you've submitted, we would have read through, including your letters, your transcripts, your essays, and some additional questions that we have out there for you. And then come prepared to engage with you in more of a conversation format. Like Carly said, it's not just ask a question, I get an answer, ask a question, but really having that conversation so I can learn as much as I can about my interviewee. So then when I write up my summary for the admissions committee to review, I've provided them, you know, more information than what was already in the application. So definitely come in with that mindset. And then also, because you're going to be engaging with students, definitely have questions for students. They're the ones who live it, breathe it every day. So their perspective is going to be different from my perspective as an administrator at the college. So make sure you have questions for your interviewers and then also the students. So in terms of a response, you usually get a response from us within about 1 to 2 weeks. And that's going to be via email, notifying you of your decision. And I will say, if students are accepted into the program, a deposit is required. So you want to make sure that you read through your email, make note of the deposit, as well as the due date for it for it. Our current deposit is $750, and it's due within 30 days from the date on your decision letter. We do work with students on a case-by-case basis in terms of extensions. So keep that in mind as you're going through the application cycle, knowing that you're going to be required to submit deposits and timelines will be required for those. So that's going to be important as well. In any offer of acceptance, if a student has been awarded a scholarship, that information will be included in their acceptance email as well. Tidbits, but I'll take a stop here to see if we have any questions that may have come up either in Facebook or on YouTube. Carly, do we have anything?
Yeah, one question that I saw on YouTube was, what percentage of entering students are Canadian?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I would have to go and look at my entering class numbers, but I would say it's usually anywhere from about 15% on the low end to maybe 25% on the high end. When we had our larger class sizes coming in, we would have anywhere from 30 to 35 Canadian students. This past year, I want to say we were at the 19 to 20 mark in terms of Canadians coming in, and we brought in a class size of 125 students. We do have a huge Canadian population here. We even have our Canadian Student Association. And so during your interview day, you will interact with students from all over the U.S. as well as Canada. We have a diverse group of students that we get to engage with our applicants and our interviewees, so you can be able to talk to someone maybe from your home province or possibly even maybe geographically, say from the same region that you may be from. So we feel that's important because, you know, students have options when it comes to programs. So if somebody came from, say, Canada into the U.S. and chose ICO, you'll want to know why that student chose ICO. So if you are someone who hasn't officially applied yet and you're in the pipeline and you are interested in speaking to students maybe from your home province or your home state, definitely reach out to the admissions team and we can see if we can put you in contact with one of our current students. And I find that our students are always willing to share their experiences with prospective students. Any more questions?
That's all that I've seen for now.
All right, great. Thank you. So just some few tidbits, if you will. We do have a summer program on campus that we do usually in July. Our dates for this year, July 13th, starting July 13th of 2022. And it's an opportunity for students, underrepresented students, to come on campus, learn more about optometry as well as ICO in Chicago. The last 2 years we did it virtually, so we're hoping that where we are in the pandemic, we'll be at a place where we can have students on campus and join us for the week to, again, learn more about optometry and ICO. One event I encourage all prospective students to do is participate in a virtual fair. These fairs are held typically in the summer in June and then also in October. This is a great opportunity for you, again, to engage with ICO, engage with our students as well as our faculty. We'll have faculty in the chats as well as members of our student affairs team representing support services, financial aid, and career development. So again, take that opportunity if you can to join us to learn more about ICO and what we have to offer. So lastly, I'll throw out our contact information. So it's myself and our two admissions team members, Latasha Jackson, who actually I just saw my typo. She's our Assistant Director of Career Development, our Assistant Director of Admissions, and Serena Stoker, our Admissions Coordinator. We are all happy to help you. I did include information, contact information for financial aid. Our Assistant Director of Financial Aid, Lauren Brooks, will be doing a couple of webinars, one starting on February 3rd, so in a few weeks' time, talking about the financial aid process. But if you have questions about financial aid, I know it can be very different than sort of your experience in undergrad, or if you're a Canadian, that's a different process as well. So feel free to email financial aid those questions that you may have. If you have questions about the admissions process, you're interested in coming to see the campus, we're currently doing campus tours. You want to do a counseling session with somebody from admissions, don't hesitate to reach out to us via email or phone to set something up. Or, if you have quick questions and you just need to talk with us, definitely reach out to us. You have our contact information here. We will be more than happy to assist you. And so before we close up here, I will ask Curly, if you have any advice for anybody who's watching, whether it's the application, whether it's interviewing, any advice for prospective students?
Oh my goodness.
And I know that's an open-ended question, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much advice I could give. Just kind of to echo what you've said previously, apply as early as possible, if nothing else, just for peace of mind, to get it over with, be as ahead as possible. I know it was very helpful for me applying as soon as possible. That way in the spring, instead of still trying to make a decision, I was focusing on apartment hunting. What else? Study as soon as possible for the OAT. Like I said earlier, enjoy your summer. Like if you're applying to optometry school and you are accepted, don't do anything that summer. Don't try to study. Don't do anything. Just relax. And just kind of pat yourself on the back for how far you've come and, get ready to work in the fall. But kind of take it easy over the summer. Try to reach out to other people. I know if you are a social media user, Instagram has a big optometry blog community. I would definitely encourage checking that out, connecting with other pre-optometry students, connecting with current optometry students, stuff like that, just to gain more insight. Or if you have any questions, I know reaching out to some people in the Instagram community was really helpful for me.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, as well as I know for our ICO Instagram, we frequently have student takeovers, so you get a chance to experience and learn more about the program from the student perspective, because they're the ones, like I said, who live it, breathe it, so they can give you some good information as well. Sydney, do you have any advice for anybody who's in the application cycle or maybe will be applying in a year or two from now?
What's funny is while Carly was talking, I'm like, okay, let me think. So I know, but just like she said, there's so much that I could say. The biggest piece that I wish I could have told myself back when I was applying is to not be discouraged. I know a lot of the information can be overwhelming. The requirements can be overwhelming, especially if your application or your journey through education is non-traditional. But just because it doesn't look like someone else's doesn't mean you aren't qualified to apply. So I would definitely give that encouragement. So if this is something that you really want, go for it. Don't let anything stop you, and be confident in what you've learned and study hard. And I think that's it.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you both. And I think you have a good point, Sydney, regarding, people not comparing themselves to others. We do have some applicants who do come sort of the non-traditional path, and they may be career changers. So we've had people who've come in who were researchers. We've had a police officer, musicians, people from diverse backgrounds who decided, I want to do something different for the second phase of my life, and chose optometry, which is great. So if that's you, don't be discouraged. Reach out to us and let us sort of help you navigate that process. It may be different than our traditional applicant who is going to be coming from out of school, usually graduating in the summer before that they're starting optometry school. But we have folks from all walks of life who join us. When you look at our class profile that's on our website, you'll get a chance to see sort of the demographics of folks, where they're from, their ethnic racial background, see the number of people who've graduated with master's degrees, those who, again, come in with non-degrees, those who may be married, just a diverse group. Our class is each year there's a different level to diversity in it, which I think makes for a great experience for our students, but then also our patients once our students are seeing the patients within the clinic. So on that note, I think we're going to wrap up here unless we have any other questions. Carly, let me know if we have anything else before we close up here. But I do want to thank everyone who is watching and who will be watching in the future. As always, if you have any questions, we are here to assist you. So please do not hesitate to reach out to myself and my team. So Carly, anything else before we finish up?
I have not seen any other questions.
All right, not a problem. Well, I thank the both of you for sharing your experiences as well as you navigated the application process, which probably maybe feels like so long ago, but it wasn't too long ago. So thank you for your time this afternoon. And thank you for everybody who has joined us.